Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the EDHREC podcast. This is Matt, one of your hosts this week, and joining me this week, I asked him if he had faith, and he said, no more. It's Dana Roach.
That was a pretty good cut. I like that.
I figured the deep cuts of 90s bands is something you would appreciate.
I very much do. I had a sausage joke I was going to tell, but I've changed my mind now. It was the worst compared to yours.
Well played. I'm glad you didn't.
They can't all be wieners. Or for our British friends, they can't all be bangers.
There it is. I love just when we get to layer on all these jokes. I'm glad that our joke-telling skills haven't gone sour like kraut. For the German, that was a stretch. Sorry, Dana, and sorry to Joey for being not here today. I feel like I owe him an apology too. But Dana, anyways, we are here. What are we talking about this week?
Yes, we're going to talk about decks that challenged us, that were difficult for us to actually brew and learn how to use.
Yeah, it's been fun brewing outside of our comfort zones a lot, and it's always an adventure and kind of what do we learn for ourselves. So we wanted to kind of give some insights. I know you've had some really good thoughts on this, Dana. I've been pushing myself more lately too, and so just wanted to take an episode and just kind of share a lot of these lessons that we've been coming to for ourselves, and hopefully it's helpful to everyone out there in listener land. But before we get into that, we have some shout outs to do first.
Yeah, first, we're proud members of Team Ultimate Guard. We specifically sought them out as a partner because we genuinely love their products. We use katana sleeves for our cards. We use Boulder deck boxes for all our decks. Their product is just top notch. Their prices are reasonable, and we literally can't recommend them enough. So Ultimate Guard, thank you for making some great products, and we're happy to be affiliated with you.
Yeah, and if you would like to support the show, you can do so. There's lots of ways you can support us, whether it's subscribing on YouTube. It's just a great way to make sure you never miss an episode, any of the special episodes that we do outside of the regular podcast too. You don't want to miss any of those. You just hit the like buttons. We appreciate that. It's just a great way to support us for free. It costs you nothing to do that. Subscribe on your local podcast app. Leaving reviews, that's always helpful too. But if you are so inclined and you want to go to patreon.com/EDHRECast, you can get yourself some perks where you want to see all of our historic challenge stats picks. We've been doing this for over 300 episodes. So there's a lot of challenge stats that we've done over the years, which you might have missed a week or two. You can see all of those over at patreon.com/EDHRECast. And there's also a tier for yourself to get the weekly patron shoutouts. So this week, I want to give a very, very special shout out to Derek Silverstone, who, Derek, you are great. We appreciate your support. But again, this is a 90s inspired episode this week. And we just want to give a shout out to your sister, Alicia Silverstone, blonde bombshell of the 90s. That's totally your sister, right? Totally related.
I assume with a name like Derek Silverstone, that has like kind of Vegas magician vibes too. Like perhaps he has a residency at the Golden Nugget and, will make an old lady disappear to the delight of all her friends 3 to 4 nights a week.
Or just related to Burt Wonderstone, the Steve Carell classic.
Yeah.
But either way, Derek, thank you so much for your support. We definitely appreciate it. And just to all of our patrons, thank you so much. You are literally the reason that we can do this show.
Yes, thank you very much. Seriously, the patron support and viewership, the likes and upvotes on YouTube, that's what helps keep us going. So thanks to everyone out there who has stuck with us throughout the years.
Yeah. All right. Well, with that, so Dana, you kind of hinted at the topic. We're going to talk about some decks we've built that really pushed us, stretched our limits, and kind of taught us how to approach maybe the game in different ways. So going into this, we kind of brainstormed a little bit. What are your just initial thoughts about how when you decide to brew a deck that is outside your comfort zone? Like what does your comfort zone for people who are new here, what does it even look like for you?
Well, so the first thing, there's stuff that you just generally don't find fun and don't like. And if there's something that you don't like doing and you don't like doing it and you've established it's not fun for you, like I don't feel like you should feel any pressure to have to push those boundaries necessarily either. So it's kind of a tough line to walk there. I genuinely don't like 5-color decks. I've tried it before. It just didn't work. I didn't enjoy the experience. I don't enjoy playing them. So like that's not the kind of outside my comfort zone thing I want to push because pushing is not fun. On the other hand, there are some things where you're like, I've just never done this and it's maybe not familiar to me, but I don't know if I would like it or not. Like that's kind of more what we're talking about here is trying things that you're not familiar with to kind of stretch your legs and stretch your abilities as a brewer and as a player.
Yeah, and I think I would take it a step further too, is finding ways that you have something maybe you don't like, maybe you know that you don't enjoy things. And there's a deck of mine. I never really liked Is It colors. They just never jived in a way that really spoke to me. And so
Sure.
for some people, it's, I know I don't like Izzet colors, so I don't really want to do that. For me, to kind of push that a little bit further on your thought, is I had to find a way to make Izzet do things that I like to do. And so that was kind of pushing limits, and we'll talk about that deck here in a little bit. But absolutely, yeah, there's a couple ways you can approach it of, I'm just not familiar with this, or I just don't like this, and so how can we maybe find a way to make those colors appealing, make that strategy appealing? Certainly ways that you can push yourself as a deck builder wherever you're at, whether you've been playing for 5 months, 5 years, or 15 years.
Yeah, I think for me, when I really began to kind of think about this, is, after having played Commander for, 4 or 5 years, and having had brewed, a dozen decks-ish or so along the way, I started having problems finding out how to make new decks that did a thing that was different than a previous deck I had brewed.
Sure.
Particularly since, you tend to want to build a certain way. So like that was one of the reasons I started being conscious of this. Like, okay, well, I'd like this commander's interesting. I have an interesting idea for a deck, but how can I find a way to play that deck that doesn't look like this other deck that, might be in the same colors or whatever. So that's what really initially got me thinking about this a lot. Somebody who traditionally brewed a lot of creature-based combat decks, I go, okay, well, I already have, half a dozen of these, but I like the idea of this commander, or I want to try something new, and how do I make this new deck not look like all of these previous decks?
Yeah, having overlap, especially when you kind of your knowledge base isn't quite there yet, if you've only been playing for a short time, finding ways to expand your knowledge base in a safe way, that's so big, because sometimes, I remember, Dana, you and I talked, we had a Glissa deck that had a lot of overlap there, but then we kind of compared, and it was something super unfamiliar for me. And so it really turned me off, because my experience playing around with Golgari colors just wasn't an enjoyable experience for me.
Sure.
And so it really turned me off for a long time of building black-green decks, because, well, I tried it once and it just wasn't for me. It wasn't really fun. It took me a long time to kind of circle back to exploring those colors again, exploring different strategies that you could be playing within those. And so, yeah, it's sometimes you have to be really, really careful. You don't want to do too much too quickly, because if you get completely out of your knowledge base and out of your comfort zone, that's when maybe you can do more harm than good sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. So an example talking about something like having a bad experience, my example of that, the first deck I'll start with talking about of mine here, is Agnes the Dragon's Lash. Agnes is into Jund colors, but it's hybrid mana. The only one in it, the casting cost that's not a hybrid cost is red. So I built Agnes as a mono red deck, and the reason I did that was I wanted a mono red deck. I had like a mono color deck of every color. I didn't have red, so I just thought I wanted to build a deck in mono red, and I had never been able to find a commander in red that did a thing that I found to be interesting. For a couple reasons. For whatever reason, I just never liked red as a color. It never seemed like it had a lot of creativity to me. It seemed very straightforward. Early on, especially, there wasn't a lot of draw in red, so like it felt limited as well. I could just never figure out how to do a thing in red in a way that I found to be interesting. So having realized that I could build Agnes as a mono red deck, I'm like, well, let me see if I can try this. That, first of all, kind of inspired me, because it was a way to brew a commander that wasn't traditional, and that's kind of something I like to do. But then I really struggled to figure out how to make that deck work.
Sure.
Because I kept trying to figure out how to like do non-red things in this mono red deck. And what I discovered I had to do was just lean into it as much as humanly possible. Instead of fighting against what red wants to do, I just leaned into being as aggro as possible, and which is against my instincts. My instincts would be to like try to find a way to inverse what the deck is telling me or the colors telling me to do. And in this case, leaning into it is what made it fun for me.
Well, and I think kind of how just card design has gotten these years. You talked about you built mono red back in the day, and it didn't really work. You didn't have card draw. Well, a lot of those kind of weaknesses, just by sheer volume of the cards that we've gotten, have kind of gotten fixed.
Yes.
I mean, you've gotten all the impulse draw in mono red now, so you have a lot of those weaknesses that you said you didn't really enjoy about red. They've kind of been shored up, and so really
Yeah.
I think that now, no matter who you are, no matter where you are in your deck building adventure, if you haven't tried a color for any reason or another, you really probably have a chance to kind of revisit that and build a deck exactly what you want to be doing in colors maybe you've never tried out just because of reasons like that.
Yeah. Yes. The game has really opened up. You know, we talk about how like challenging it is to deal with the sheer amount of cards that come out every single year. But the upside of that is that there's so many more options and there's so many more chances for WotC to fix problems in certain colors or paper over, issues, whether it's a card draw in white or red or, whatever, things like that. Like there's chance that they've had to fix that and they can fix that much more quickly or with a lot more different options to try to fix that than they could have years ago when there was only a few sets per year.
So you built this Agnes deck. You kind of leaned into it. What did you kind of learn? What was your takeaway from kind of recircling back to this mono red theme that you just haven't done before?
I mean, sometimes you don't have to walk uphill both ways. You don't have to, fight against everything. You can actually go with the current a little bit. So that's just a good lesson in general, I think. Like me stuck in my ways and wanting to kind of fight against that. You don't have to do that. That can be fun if you just lean into what it does and really embrace the color philosophy. And I that gave me a new appreciation for red in Commander as well. Just being able to like red. I think red doesn't lend itself to you fighting against it, unlike maybe some other colors.
Sure.
Embracing that gave me new appreciation for playing red in Commander overall too.
So sometimes, restrictions breed creativity, like they say, but sometimes self-imposed restrictions are maybe too restrictive and you need to kind of let go of those a little bit. I can appreciate that. Yeah. Sometimes just got to, like you said, go with the current. I like that.
Yeah.
Well, one thing that I also do like, Dana, is my Tom Bombadil deck. So as soon as this card was previewed, everybody who knows me knew how excited I was. And yes, I love the flavor. I love kind of what this commander's doing from a story point of view. But one thing that I really wasn't expecting was how much I would struggle with the deck. Not just because of what the deck does, because the commander itself is pretty straightforward. It's 5-color commander that, as long as there are 4 more counters on sagas that you control, Tom Bombadil has hexproof and indestructible. And then whenever the final chapter ability of a saga you control resolves, you get to flip cards from the top of your library until you hit a saga, and then you put it on the battlefield, and that only triggers once per turn. So basically, you get to recycle and capitalize on your sagas fully resolving. It's a super fun commander, and yes, the design of it and the play is fairly linear. What I really had to push myself and develop as a commander player is sequencing and playing quickly. I know that you got to play one of my very first games with Tom Bombadil, and I think I speak for both of us. It wasn't a great experience all around. The deck took a long time to play out. And so over the years of me playing this, not years, but over time, playing more games with this deck, I really had to focus on sequencing, thinking a turn, 2 turns ahead sometimes of how I'm going to play this deck out and finding ways that I can not shortcut things so people get lost in it, but making sure I'm being clear and quick with how I'm resolving all these triggers.
Well, just in general, that deck is interesting. Yes, you being a Lord of the Rings nerd, I knew you would want to build something for Lord of the Rings. As fiddly as that deck is, that is very much not a Matt Morgan deck. Like, some people do like playing a deck where there's a gazillion moving pieces, whether, blink decks.
Yeah.
There are some people that like, they like, okay, I'm going to flicker this commander to make these things and do these things, then flicker this stuff, and like all of those game actions happening in a single turn, they find that fun. That's not something that has ever struck me about you when you play Magic. You like turning big bodies sideways and like smashing stuff together.
Yeah.
Whereas sagas make you have to do that. You have to fiddle around.
Yeah, absolutely. I had to kind of teach myself that like there's a reason that I give myself as few opportunities to make a mistake. Like when I played Legacy and Modern, for example, I knew my strengths and weaknesses. Like I can get a straightforward game plan together. I played Infect, I played Burn, I played like combo decks, quick linear combo decks. And so playing something like Tom Bombadil, where there's, like you said, it's a really fiddly deck. There's a lot of moving pieces. It's the same reason I've never played a Super Friends deck, because the pace of play is it's a slog sometimes. Just absolutely, you have so many decision points literally every turn. So what I had to focus on was not making sure I knew kind of what's the last chapter look like? I had to look exactly at the next chapter on every single saga, because sometimes you have 4 or 5 sagas on the battlefield, so you have to be planning out a turn or 2 ahead of time sometimes. Okay, the second chapter on binding the old gods, that's going to happen next turn, so I have to plan for that. In the darkness, bind them. I have to plan for the next chapter on that. And so really being able to think ahead and just keeping better mental notes. And then, I mean, I'm not going to write down my notes as I'm going, but I've seen some people do it where, okay, that's the biggest thing, so I have to worry about that next. And so knowing what mode, because at least with sagas versus planeswalkers, you know what mode is happening next turn with every single saga, no matter what. Now, sometimes you have ways to kind of manipulate that, but you can anticipate that. But I had to really, really focus on, okay, I'm going to sequence this better. I'm going to get everything, just the play pattern in general. And I know that you talked about it one time when we got to play at MagicCon Vegas last year. I had one corner of my playmat that was only sagas, and that was all I had to focus on, because the rest of the battlefield, it doesn't really matter all that much as I'm resolving all these different saga triggers.
Sure.
So little tips and tricks that I had to like kind of teach myself. I know that I'm 1000% a faster player because of the lessons that I learned while playing this Tom Bombadil deck that admittedly can take a long time to resolve just any given turn.
Well, it's also the kind of thing I think that can be very useful for just improving your skills in general. Like if you've got a Selesnya Stompy deck and a Gruul Stompy deck and a mono green Stompy deck, those decks probably aren't necessarily teaching you new tricks that would apply to other decks. Like the things that are good in one of those decks is good in the other deck, and you're not really maybe brushing up on some skills. Whereas if you then throw a Tom Bombadil deck into the mix or something like that that's kind of more fiddly and complicated, then you are going to brush up on some things that you don't brush up on playing those other 3 Stompy decks, for example. And those skills might translate over to those decks. You might discover, there's some play patterns that are very useful here that I missed because I never had to really learn how to do them or get better at doing them because the deck never asked me to do that.
Yeah, I recently got back into playing Magic Online. And so I forced myself, I'm going to play this Pro Tour winning control deck. And that was just a muscle that I haven't had to flex in a long time. And not only do I understand how those decks function and what they need to be looking for, I get to see weaknesses in those. And so, like you said, I get to come back to my stompy, aggro, Selesnya, Matt Morgan tendencies, and I know how to attack those a little bit better too. We talk sometimes about borrowing your friends' decks and getting to play those, and you understand more about how they function. Well, you also have to understand more about the weaknesses that they can have sometimes too. And so you are really helping your preferred playstyle sometimes by learning and understanding more about other deck strategies. And that was absolutely the case with my Tom Bombadil deck.
Yeah, and that's fun. At least it can be for me. Maybe it isn't for everybody, but like getting better at stuff is fun. And maybe you don't want to, you don't have to necessarily like practice or work at it or something, but like if you can accidentally get better while you're just playing Magic and have it applied to other decks, that tends to make those more fun to play. So like you're just kind of accidentally doing a little bit of homework, and that can be useful and make your game experience better.
Yeah, absolutely. So Dana, what's another deck that you've gotten to learn from as you've been building it, as you've been playing it?
So one I kind of struggled with. So I have a Jaheira and Agent of the Iron Throne deck. Jaheira lets you tap tokens to add a green mana, so it makes them all into basic Llanowar elves. And Agent of Iron Throne deals damage whenever a creature you control or an artifact you control leaves the battlefield. Originally, though, I built that as Saravak, Deathbringer, and Raised by Giants. Jaheira is a black creature with a green creature with a black background. Saravak's a black creature with I was using a green background, Raised by Giants. The way Saravak works, at the beginning of each player's end step, if no permanent left the battlefield this turn, that player loses X life, or X is Saravak's power. And Raised by Giants just makes your creature have a base power toughness of 10/10. So my thought process with that deck, play Saravak, have multiple ways to buff his power and toughness up, including Raised by Giants. I'm running a bunch of Eldrazi spawns and Scions, so I will always have something to sacrifice to make sure I don't take damage, because it also does damage to me. Meanwhile, my opponents won't always have something to sacrifice, so they will take, hopefully a large amount of damage off Saravak. The problem that I didn't think about with that deck was everybody has treasures nowadays, let alone, maybe blood tokens or food tokens or just creatures that they can sacrifice to something, or, they'll make a deal with somebody. Hey, if I swing into you, can you block this creature? It literally didn't work. I think that 3 or 4 times I played it, I don't know if I dealt damage to anybody even one time. Like, I'm not exaggerating. I'm not sure I ever managed to actually have it successfully deal damage at all, let alone like lethal damage.
Sure.
So I had this deck that was filled with Eldrazi Spawns and Scions that I had built with this whole game plan, and I don't want to dismantle this whole deck. I'm like, what could I do with it? I want to putting Jaheira and Ancient Iron Throne there, and it just, like, without having to change very much in the deck at all, it just worked, because then I could sacrifice those Spawns and Scions that I was planning to use to not take damage, and instead use them to actually deal damage to people via Ancient Iron Throne, or if I happen to have Meathook Massacre in play or something like that. There was other effects that kind of do that bleed damage as well. So I found out how to make a working deck out of that, but getting out of my comfort zone here, it was a situation where this is a deck that deals all its damage entirely outside of the combat damage step, all of it. And whether it was a Servok version of this deck or the current version that actually works, figuring out how to do this and have a deck work in a way that didn't involve swinging at all was a challenge for me. And I am really glad I invested the time in making that deck work and making a version of that strategy work, because it's been a lot of fun finding a way to play a deck where I just never turn stuff sideways to swing. But I'm also like, it's not a combo deck. I don't love playing combo, so it was a way to do something much different than what I usually do, while still like doing things I enjoy.
And you're doing a fun strategy. It's not like it's an unknown strategy. Aristocrats is what Joey kind of does. Yeah. Joey kind of lives in that space.
Absolutely.
But doing it in a way, and the execution of it, just kind of flexing that muscle to find, like we said earlier, strategies that maybe normally you didn't really latch onto because of whatever reason, and finding ways to make that fun for you. And you very much could have gone the whole like Grave Pact, Dictative Erebos route and kind of played the oppressive beatdown version of that. But you really found a way, just like, I'm going to close games out. And it's a fun experience, because a lot of times I think most players, they think of a commander and they build a deck around it instead of, well, I have this deck, but I don't have a good commander for it. That in itself, reversing that order, can completely be a learning experience on how to just dig through all the vast options of what legendary creatures are out there. Now that we have backgrounds, now that we have partner with, all those different variants on partner, what can we do that's going to fit this pile of 98, 99 cards that I have that I really want to play but don't have a good commander for?
Yeah, honestly, like, that's one of the best pieces of advice I think you could give people for stepping outside their comfort zone, is to come at things backwards. Come up with an idea first, and then worry about finding the commander for it later. Because I think very few people come at it from that direction. They see a commander and try to figure out how to build it. I think that is a great way to step outside of what's familiar to you, is to come at it backwards like that.
Absolutely. I very much agree that just build the deck, build the idea, and sometimes eventually the commander doesn't exist yet, but it will come. Ukima and Khazar is a deck of mine. I had a Sultai +1/+1 counters deck for forever. Didn't have a good commander. I was playing whatever I could, Muldrotha half the time, just because it was a good commander.
Absolutely.
It wasn't good for that strategy, but it was just a quality commander. And eventually I had a way to kind of inherit what I was already doing in the deck because a new commander came out. Absolutely, that happens all the time. Just build the deck, like you said, Dana, and maybe just the commander will come in time.
Sure. This seems like a good time to segue into challenging some stats here.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different data on EDHREC, and we don't always agree with it, so sometimes it's best to take a look at it and see if there's better ways to utilize these cards.
Yeah, let's do it.
This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. We all carry around different stressors, both big and small, and when we keep them bottled up, it can start to affect us negatively. Therapy is a safe space to get things off your chest and to figure out how to work through whatever is weighing you down. I have a full-time job and I'm a content creator, which can also feel like a second full-time job. I have a family and a child and friends I want to spend time with and games of Commander I want to play. And setting boundaries in regards to time management is a very important skill for me to be able to have to do all the things that I want to do. Therapy isn't just for those who've experienced major trauma. It's helpful for those learning positive coping skills and to assist you in being the best version of yourself. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online and designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Get it off your chest with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/EDH today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/EDH.
Well, Dana, let me get us started then on challenge stats this week. So my challenge this week, it's for a newer commander, but the deck is getting fairly well fleshed out these days. But there's a card that I kind of see getting included a little bit that I think it should be significantly more. So the commander's Felix 5 Boots. That is the 5 bootsed. I don't know what the proper term is. However many boots are on this ooze. It's in Sultai colors, has Medicine Ward 2, but the key ability, if a creature you control dealing combat damage to a player causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. So Marcus Mutant Mare is new card from Fallout, 3 and Simic colors, so a blue and a green for a 4/4 with Vigilance and Trample, and it has a combat damage trigger. So whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card if that creature had a +1/+1 counter on it. If it doesn't, put a +1/+1 counter on it. So there's lots of different versions of this. You have the Coastal Piracies, you have Bread for the Hunt, which is the dependent on having +1/+1 counters. And we don't really love Bread for the Hunt, but Marcus Mutant Mare fuels itself, but also guarantees with Felix 5 Boots out on the battlefield that you're going to either buff up your creature, then draw a card, or just draw 2 cards. And that's wildly powerful. Making sure that you're able to kind of fuel your team and get the team growing in size as the game progresses. It's an engine that fuels itself. And I really like what Marcus is doing, especially if you're able to kind of guarantee these triggers like you get to do with Felix 5 Boots out there. It's not an enormous ability, but like once you get the engine going, say you draw a card and put a +1/+1 counter on it, next turn you're drawing 2 cards per creature that deals combat damage. And if you're going wide, that is a super, super powerful engine. I know you're probably already playing a lot of Coastal Piracy type of effects, Reconnaissance Mission. And I think if you want a version that's going to beef up your team at the same time, Marcus Mutant Mare it's a fantastic addition to those Felix 5 Boots decks. It's only showing up in 20% of decks right now. I think that number is a little low. I don't know if it's people just kind of still taking their time with Felix decks, or maybe just Marcus is kind of new and kind of in one of those supplemental sets. People haven't really gotten a lot of cards out there from the set. I don't know, but either way, Marcus is an absolute home run for Felix decks, so definitely give that a look.
I'm surprised it wasn't just someone suggesting more boots for Felix 5 Boots.
I mean, you have Swiftfoot boots, you have Trailblazers boots, you have Lightning Greaves. They're not boots, but they're greaves. Kind of the same thing.
Close enough.
Yeah.
Well, my challenge this week is brought to us by listener Seaburn Visor. Seaburn has a suggestion here for the card Simulacrum in Judith Carnage Connoisseur decks. It's currently only in 8 of the over 2,000 Judith decks. The way Judith works, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you choose one. That spell gains Death Touch and Lifelink, or you create a 2/2 red imp creature token with, when this creature dies, it deals 2 damage to each opponent. Simulacrum's a very old card. The last actual real reprint, I think, was in 4th edition, and the text on the card doesn't really match what the card actually does. What the card does is it's an instant for 1 and a black. You gain a life equal to the damage dealt to you this turn, and Simulacrum deals damage to target creature you control equal to the damage dealt to you this turn. So basically, you're redirecting damage dealt to you to a creature you control. What's really nice about it in the Judith deck is, because you're gaining life for the damage you dealt, you can also give the spell lifelink and gain double life. And then because Judith makes 2/2 creatures, you have a probably handful of token bodies that you can redirect that damage to that you don't mind losing when you bounce that damage away from you. And when those tokens die, they deal 2 more damage to each opponent. So it's just a really efficient use of that spell, and it's kind of a perfect deck for it. I've mentioned this one before in life gain decks because technically it gains you life even though the card doesn't say it does. But in this Judith deck, that's a really good slot for it as well. It's kind of a nice fog that has a really big upside, especially if you happen to have an imp out that you can bounce the damage into.
Yeah, I mean, you love Simulacrum. That's a card that you've played and We like to explain that what the card says isn't actually what it does.
Yes.
This is another one of those opportunities. So I'm not surprised you're looking for an opportunity to talk about Simulacrum.
So yeah, it's a cool card. It was a good pick, and thanks a lot, Sebring. We appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's get back into the main show. We have a couple more decks that we wanted to talk about. So Dana, what's another deck of yours that you've gotten a chance to kind of learn from?
So one that I'm still kind of struggling with here is Glissa Sunseeker. And this is doubly challenging for me. Usually when I go to brew a deck, it's because something has inspired me to build that deck or that commander. In this case, the inspiration is I have the other three Glissas, and I just thought I might as well build the fourth one.
Yeah.
So for those who don't know, Glissa Sunseeker is two-ended double green, and she has a tap ability. You can tap and destroy an artifact that has a mana value equal to the amount of mana in your mana pool, which is a kind of a very strange ability. And that was probably a little bit trickier back in the days of mana burn. Today, you just, if you're going to go cast a spell, you can just put the amount of mana you want to put in your mana pool, tap Glissa to blow up an artifact, and then add more and cast a spell. So it's more awkward than anything. And there's some obvious things you can do in that deck too. There's ways you can turn things into artifacts, whether it's repeatable things like liquid metal torque or liquid metal coating. So there's multiple ways you can do that. The problem I've had with it so far is trying to figure out what it did. Like, I always want my decks to do some kind of a thing. I want to say, oh, this is the specific theme I am doing with this deck. And this is what I've really struggled trying to figure out what that theme is. Because I don't know what it is. Just destroying artifacts isn't a theme that lends itself to you winning games.
Yeah, not at all.
Particularly mono green. There might be ways you could do that if you had access to other colors, but there's not a lot you can do in that deck. So talking about outside of your comfort zone, this is one that's still outside my comfort zone because I don't know what I'm doing. I am still kind of freewheeling, playing jazz with this, trying to figure out how I want to brew the deck, and I'm up to like my fourth iteration that I've played with it so far, and I'm still not happy with it. But I'm going to keep trying, and what this is different than I usually do, how it's outside my comfort zone, is usually I have a plan. Usually I know by the time I build the deck and I'm like testing it out, I've already figured out what my theme is, what it's supposed to be doing. And this one, I haven't found it yet. So I'm playing a deck in a lot of cases that like just has creatures in it and isn't built around doing anything just yet. And I'm hoping something will stick. And as I play it, I will eventually like find it in the edit, so to speak. But I haven't got there yet. But learning to be able to play a deck that like isn't fully formed has actually been kind of a fun experience for me so far.
I mean, we know you, Dana. I know you. And you don't build a deck without having a Charlie Kelly, Pepe Sylvia murder board.
That's right.
Like
right.
you have all of your different charts planned out and everything. You always have a plan is what I'm saying.
Yes.
It's very surprising to me hearing you, Dana, saying, I don't really have a plan. I guess it'll come together eventually, because you're right. Yeah, Glissa Sunseeker, you look at that card, tap to destroy an artifact equal to the mana in your mana pool. That's... yeah, you're not going to win a lot of games doing that. And so finding ways
right.
to do that, good on you. And maybe the lesson, I guess, for me at least, don't give up on a deck. Kind of keep working through it is definitely a piece of advice, because decks don't always work out the box.
Yeah. For me, this very much feels like I'm trying to keep as much of an open mind as possible and test as many different things and hoping one of them works. Versus like going in with a plan. So I'm trying to stay open-minded to what options are out there that present themselves while I'm playing it. And it maybe doing this isn't the best idea, but doing something different than you usually do is kind of more the lesson for me. I'm just trying something I don't usually do, and I think that's been a little bit freeing in this case.
Sure. I mean, and maybe just the Glissa's there, and the 99 kind of does its thing independently of Glissa. I mean, that's always a possibility. You never know. But it also is fun to kind of see that process and that struggle that you're working through the deck, and you're still learning lessons. You don't build a deck and you kind of call it quits after that. Like,
right.
You're still going through that process. It's an ongoing thing.
Absolutely. So what do you have for ones that are another one that's been a challenge for you or a learning experience for you?
Well, I mean, so this is the deck I kind of hinted at a couple times earlier, but Ovika, Enigma, Goliath. So everybody that knows me, like I don't play a ton of blue. I don't love Is It colors. It was something that just never worked with the way that I like to build decks. And this is the deck that I kind of had to wait for a deck to kind of accommodate what I wanted to do. I had a Jeskai Tokens deck years ago. There's a standard deck that kind of did that with Hordling Outburst and all sorts of cards like that, instants and sorceries that make tokens. And I've always enjoyed that type of strategy, but never had a way to kind of make that work in Commander. I tried Shu Yun for a little bit. I tried a couple other commanders and like nothing really stuck. Nothing was fun, or at least felt like it was doing much. And so Ovika, Enigma, Goliath came around, and then Saruman, also another legend from Lord of the Rings that amasses orcs all the time. Those are two commanders that came out pretty quickly next to each other and gave me a lot of options of, okay, there's this color combination. I want to make tokens and Spellslinger colors, so how can I make that work? And so Ovika, Enigma, Goliath it's 5 and Is It colors, for those of you who don't know. For Phyrexian Nightmare, 6/6 flying, ward 3 and pay 3 life. And then whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you create X 1/1 red Phyrexian goblin creature tokens, where X is the mana value of that spell, and they gain haste until end of turn. So I finally had the deck that I always wanted to build. I wanted to have that Spellslinger token-making deck, but then the commander, oh my gosh, 7 mana and Is It colors, that is practically a million. All my commander decks, I would say, revolve a good deal around my commander being in play. I need them to be there. And in Matt Morgan fashion, I don't think things through that well. And so I'm typically just rushing my commander out there and just kind of see where the chips fall. I can't do that in this deck. I can't spend 7 mana. And even though it does have ward 3 and pay 3 life, Ovika has an enormous target on its back. And Dana, the last time I played this deck was against you. And I saw you side-eyeing, like, is he going to play Ovika this turn?
Right.
Is he going to play Ovika this turn?
Right.
Because yeah, absolutely. Like I can't just play Ovika just completely unprotected except by the ward. That just doesn't work with this deck.
Again, this is one of those decks that doesn't feel like a Matt Morgan deck. It's much like your Tom Bombadil deck. The way it actually plays out, and like just looking at it, really like, oh, this is very much not a Matt commander. No. So it's interesting to see you stretch your legs and like play something that if you ask someone to guess who in the podcast of the three of us whose deck did this belong to, you'd be like the 6th choice.
The 6th choice.
It's that much not a Matt Morgan commander.
But I mean, I found ways to make it work. Like I get to play cards like Surge to Victory. So I'll make a few tokens. I'm still going to win through combat damage. I'm going to make them deal however many. I think it was like 15 damage each token is what I ended up getting the last time I played this. And so like I still get to do the things I like to do, but I really had to just kind of, again, stretch my legs on this one. I had to learn timing, when to play the commander. Just because I have 7 mana doesn't mean I need to play Ovika, because I need to follow it up with something immediately after. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of kind of learning experiences. Tempo decks is something that, again, I'm not super skilled with. And this very much is a tempo deck. You have to find the right time to play out your answers, play out your threats. And this was definitely a learning experience for that, because as much fun as it is to make an army, you also have to be able to reliably do that. And just being able to do that in Is It colors was kind of how I kind of found that fun middle ground, for me at least, in it's something new to me, but it's also something familiar enough that I'm going to be able to latch on it and kind of comprehend my strategy going forward.
One of the things for me, because I started the show off here talking about looking for different ways to build decks, because I had already built multiple combat damage decks. So I was looking for ways to build a few things that like tended to that wanted to do damage outside the combat step, and that was one of the reasons I built a fling deck, and one of the reasons I eventually got that Jaheira deck working, and I have in Athreos Pestilence deck. So like I went through a phase where like I was trying to brew decks that didn't win in the combat damage step, that also weren't combo decks, just to do something different from what I did. But now I think the 2 most recent decks I have built are I've gone back to winning via creature combat damage. But what I wound up doing to, again, further like step outside my comfort zone with those was brew decks that won in combat damage ways that you wouldn't normally see someone do it. So Caliphate I've talked about before on here, which is a mono blue Voltron deck that wins via devotion.
Yeah.
And I also have a Veil, Candlekeep Researcher, and Haunted One deck that also is a combat step attack deck that wins via mages attacking. And Veil herself isn't necessarily something that you would expect to be a combat damage creature. She is 3 and a blue for a human wizard. She's a 2/3 with vigilance, and you can tap her to add an amount of colorless mana equal to her toughness to your mana pool, and you can't use that to cast spells from your hand. And what's relevant there is she has a tap ability that I occasionally use a mana for, but I kind of tend to not care about it that much, because Haunted One says commanders you own have, whenever this creature becomes tapped, it and other creatures you control that share a creature type with it get +2/+0 and gain Undying until the end of turn. But that isn't capped to a single amount of triggers. Every time you can tap your commander creature, your creatures get +2/+0. So I'm running a bunch of mages that share a creature type with Veil, and a bunch of ways to untap Veil because she has a tap ability. So I can tap her to add mana to the mana pool, untap her using a bunch of different effects in the deck, tap her again, and every time I add +2/+0 to a bunch of mages, hopefully some of which have evasion, whether it's flying or unblockable or whatever, and I can have turns where I can just swing with a bunch of mages that are, dealing 70 damage to people. That was a way to kind of go back to the thing that I was comfortable doing, but finding a way to do it in a way that I wasn't used to. I wasn't doing it in Selesnya colors. I wasn't doing it in Gruul colors. I was doing it in mono blue, and I was doing it in Dimir, and in Dimir doing it with mostly blue creatures. So I found a way to do something different that was outside my comfort zone, while it was also a thing that I was familiar with. And that was also a fun experience for me.
Yeah, Dimir Wizards isn't one that I kind of anticipate getting swung at for, like you said, each wizard is a 20 power monstrosity. Granted, it only ever has 1 or 2 toughness, but
right.
But still, it's a scary thing staring down the barrel. And that deck it's incredibly resilient too. Every time that I've played against, I think, well, crap, Veil can't untap in play. That's just it's so hard to get rid of it because of that Undying trigger too. So
right.
You built a very resilient commander, a very resilient way to kind of build around. And yeah, it's a fun deck to watch pop off. It's scary to pop off against because it's again your Dimir colors. You're playing a lot of control elements,
right?
And again, kind of like the lessons that I had to learn with Ovika, the timing has to be right. You can't just blast it out there and just run straight forward.
Absolutely,
you have to plan your turn a turn ahead of time, maybe 2 turns, because things might be shifting around. So you really have to look for that good opportunity to strike. Except in Dimir, you're kind of making that opportunity.
Absolutely. So I think the lesson here, is if you're somebody who has a particular play style, you don't even have to maybe get away from that play style. You can just try to find a way to play that play style in colors that don't normally lend itself to doing that. Mm-hmm. And that's maybe not that easy to do, but it's a fun challenge too. So you're both finding a challenge and you're stepping outside your comfort zone while also doing something that's also still a little bit familiar to you.
I mean, I feel like we're saying that a lot is you can pretty much play whatever strategy you want in whatever colors you want these days. And they're just finding the right combination of cards in the 99 plus the command zone.
Yeah.
And you can really empower kind of whatever you want. It's fun to see that. And I know that, again, we kind of lament sometimes the vast quantities of cards that are coming out every single month, it seems like, but it does lead to some of these cool, benefits where, okay, Dana can play this hyper aggro Dimir deck now that's going to whack you for 70 each turn, or I get to play this control deck in whatever other colors. There's a lot of fun, not really consequences to it, but it is nice to see that players can now latch onto, okay, I have a strategy and I have a color and I can really do that. It may not be as efficient or as optimized maybe, but
right.
The being able to do that in general is kind of the point. And that's what I really want to focus on.
Well, and to just look at the bigger picture too, learning how to do these things with tools that are maybe a little bit less efficient, finding ways to, play creature combat in colors that don't lend themselves to that is, I think, makes you a better brewer if you find ways to do that, even if it might be more challenging. I think that helps you as a player because you have to find those moments. You have to find card interactions that aren't as clear cut as Craterhoof Behemoth.
I mean, so I think that there's 2 different approaches here because as a Crater Hoof Behemoth player and enjoyer, I absolutely think that there's definitely times and place for you to, okay, I just want to do the thing.
For sure.
I want to do the thing and do it in the best way. Because I don't think, Dana, you don't want to do things that are subpar for the sake of doing them subpar. You want to do things,
for sure.
Maybe you're giving up a little bit on efficiency because you want the flexibility. And I love Crater Hoof. I know that you like overrunning people, but finding other ways to do that. Maybe the goal is the same. The mechanism to getting there is a little bit different.
Well, I mean, like if you're someone who's, a mountain climber or something, like you don't continue to climb that like very first mountain that you climb. Those people that are into that start looking for like the larger and larger challenge.
Sure.
To scale up the challenge. And I think after you've been playing for a long amount of time, you oftentimes tend to look for something more challenging. And like that's one way you can push that, is looking for that larger mountain to climb or that more challenging deck to play. Yeah,
that I definitely can get behind, because Chris Sharma didn't become who he is by, only climbing on like the little bunny hills. Like, you have to push yourself. Like, and that's just, a lot of things are like that.
Yeah.
You have to start with something that's comfortable, that's easy, and you can kind of get used to that, and then push yourself a little bit more the next time, and the next time. And that absolutely is a good attitude to have towards Magic the Gathering too, because when you're building decks, if you're only good at building one type of deck, that's all you're going to ever know.
Right.
And so that's kind of the point of this whole episode. We had to build decks that were outside of our comfort zone. Things that, Tom Bombadil and making those fiddly little 10-minute turn decks, that is not what I like to do at all, but I was able to learn a whole lot from that. And I think that's kind of where the last deck that at least I want to talk about is my Council of 4 deck. And it's probably been, I've said many, many times on this podcast, it's probably one of my favorite decks that I've built in a long time, because I've learned a ton from it. I cannot count the lessons that I've taught myself, but also just the way that it plays, the way that it kind of adjusts to everything going on. The Council of 4 has just been, when I look at Archidecks and I look at all of my different decks, it is my most viewed deck by a long shot. And so it is kind of fun seeing that other people also are kind of attaching to and enjoying the adventures that I've taken with Council of 4. So Council of 4, it's 3 in Azorius colors, so a blue and a white, for a 0/8 human noble. Right off the bat, a 0/8 is not something I would normally play. So whenever a player draws their second card during their turn, I draw a card. And whenever a player casts their second spell during their turn, create a 2/2 white knight creature token. It needs other players to build its army. It needs other players to really function and soup up. So Jason Altz wrote years and years ago, for people who haven't been playing that long, over on Cool Stuff Inc. about this 75% theory where you build a deck that kind of adjusts to what everybody else is doing. You're playing cards that are modal almost, because they kind of scale in power with what other people are doing at the table. That was what this whole deck really wanted to do. It was kind of inspired by Sheldon Menery's Stop Hitting Yourself deck. So it's only going to be as good as what other people around me are doing. And finding cards that do that, and cards that I like that fit that bill, that was absolutely a pain. Now, there's so many cards that scale, and they kind of depend on my opponents to be doing something big. There's a lot of cards like Access Denied and Spell Swindle. There's fun cards like Illusory Ambusher, where you get to draw 10 cards. Super, super easy.
Nice.
But also finding ways to actually turn that value into wins absolutely is a challenge. And just Azorius in general.
Well, so yeah, that's an interesting point. So like if I were to get in the mood to build an Azorius control deck, I can probably just sit down in Architect and just off the top of my head populate that deck 120 cards deep, because like that's a color pair I play a lot of. I've got a couple decks that play very control-y in Azorius. That's not a challenging thing for me to get started on brewing, because I just top of my head know a lot of the stuff I will be adding into that list. That's absolutely not going to be the case for you.
No.
You're just top of your head. You don't already know, like, here's a basic counterspell suite I want to add to a list. Here's a basic like solid removal package, or like ways to slow people down in these colors. In Azorius, that's just not a knowledge pool that you can easily tap into, and that required you to like go do some work.
I had to do so much work, but also like not just the cards that go into the 99, but the play patterns behind those cards. Don't play a normal counterspell suite. And so finding the right cards to steal from my opponents, like, am I going to play, when I play Desertion, am I going to steal the first threat that I see, or am I going to wait and bide my time? And that's something that absolutely I had no idea how to do. I don't know how to be patient both in and out of Magic. And so it's just really funny that like this has been one of the most fun decks that I've built in such a long time, because cards like Gale's Redirection, all these different things that like I'm just not used to playing and casting, but then also seeing the situations that this deck gets to build and kind of create on the battlefield. I get to play with pretty much whoever it is, whether they're playing a low power deck or a high power deck. If it's low power, the best thing I'm going to steal is a vanilla 5/5. But if I'm stealing somebody's Orcish Bowmasters, then like their deck is usually kind of built to deal with that type of threat.
Yeah, this is a good example of a deck that like did a couple different things for you. It let you get outside your comfort zone and learn how to brew in a way that you're not used to brewing. And it also gave you a deck that like lets you play in a lot of different situations where some of your other decks might not work that way.
Yeah, there is no, like when people say, well, my deck is a 7, like this deck is literally whatever power level the aggregate of the table
is. If yours is a 7, mine is a 7 as well.
Yes, and if yours is a 6, then mine's a 6. If it's a 4, then mine's a 4. Like, I love that I can pretty much take this to whatever event I'm going to, whether it's like the Star City Vegas or Magic Con, anything like that. I can take this deck to any of those events and I can just sit down at a table and it's going to participate because it's only as good as what the rest of the table is doing. I love that. It's just been such a fun deck to build, such a fun deck to play, and just seeing other people kind of get along with it too. I've learned so much about this deck. It's socially, not just about Magic the game, but the social aspect of the format too. That's where I appreciate this deck probably more than any other deck I've ever built.
And now as somebody who's like gone back to playing Magic Online and things like that, that is also maybe a useful skill to translate to there. Like,
absolutely.
That you probably hadn't have picked up like, oh, so now if there's a, control deck or something that I'm going to be playing a little bit of an MTGO, well, now you have a little more experience with playing some of those cards as well.
Yep, absolutely.
One thing here though, like I'm always interested in hearing different ways people learn to build outside their comfort zone. I talked about moving to trying to win via non-combat damage, and I talked about like switching back to the combat step, but doing it in colors that don't traditionally lend themselves to that. But we'd love to hear anything that our listeners have done that have kind of pushed them outside their comfort zone, or even suggestions for us of like things we could look at to continue to stretch our legs a little bit. I think we're always looking to brew something new, both because it's useful for the cast and because we just like brewing decks and playing Magic. And I would love hearing suggestions about like just ways to get a feel for different ways to win the game and different ways to brew decks.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that has been really fun ever since we started working with Architect with the monthly deck building contests that they do over there. It's been so fun to watch these different prompts that they have every single month, and then how players kind of carry those prompts out. Here's a guided deck building prompt, and then watching people's imagination really run away with that. It's been super fun to see that too. So if you folks want to see some really cool deck building restrictions, really cool prompts that kind of guide everything, check out the deck building contest. They launch the first Wednesday of every month over on Architect. And it's so fun getting to see the decks, see people's kind of descriptions and what inspired them to go that way. So yeah, definitely check that out. If you want a nice little learning experience for yourself in a safe way, that's a great way to do it too.
Absolutely, for sure. Well, in addition to sounding off in the comments below, if you want to find us online, you can find me online at Dana Roach. I'm writing articles for EDHREC and Commander's Herald, and you can find all of us together at patreon.com/EDHRECast.
And you can find me on pretty much any social media platform at Mathimus55. That's MATHIMUS55. And don't forget, we are proud members of Team Ultimate Guard. So if you want some of the best deck accessories for your decks, whether it's boxes, whether you want the best sleeves out there, check out Ultimate Guard as well. And also don't forget Joey at Joseph M. Schultz on Twitter, on Instagram, any of those as well. Thank you, Joey. Thank you for our editing. Appreciate all the hard work they do there. But with all of that said, I think it's time to wrap it up. So thank you everyone so much for all of your comments that I'm sure we're going to hear from. And we'll see you next week. And until then, EDH wreck your deck before you wreck your deck.